size apartment. So that's not just a generic term, rent reasonableness. There's a form for that, and HUD will provide it to you. The rent reasonableness means I've looked at 4 apartments, including this one. I've looked at least online. You don't have to physically visit the apartment. But these are 3 similar apartments to this one that my household wants to rent. And they also cost about the same thing. So you fill out that form for rent reasonableness, you fill out the form for the housing quality standards, you make sure there's a 12-month lease. There's a few other things you also have to do, but you got to make sure that that rental unit is appropriate. The additional details about that can be found at the link that's provided on this slide, and you'll be provided these slides, and they'll be posted on the HLA website so that you can click on these live links. There's a question about rental assistance. So in the chat, does it include first last deposit? So rental assistance type projects do include those things. That because of the way HUD programs are defined in those administrative regulations, some of those things are called supportive services, and some of them are called rental assistance. So what you'll want to do is look at that, big program regulations requirement and decide where those things go when you're building your budget. But the general answer to that question is yes, they do include those things. Okay, let's look at the next slide then, leasing. So when leasing funds are used, here's the difference between leasing and rental assistance. The lease is between the landlord and the agency. So the landlord and OFY, my agency, sign the lease, and then I pay the rent using leasing funds, that leasing line item on the budget, and then the household moves in. This is sometimes called master leasing. So let's say I operate a rapid rehousing program using master leasing. That means my agency signs the leases and I have households move in. That puts the onus on the agency more than on the household in that case. One benefit of leasing is that you don't have to match leasing funds. As I mentioned on a previous slide, that 25% match requirement doesn't apply. But at the same time, and this rarely happens, frankly, I've run a lot of leasing and rental assistance programs in my lifetime. And every once in a while, somebody trashes a unit or kind of moves out unexpectedly. I'm still on the hook, as the agency, if it's a lease between the landlord and me. Whereas if it were a rental assistance project and the lease were between the household and the landlord, that's up to them to figure out the repercussions of that behavior. So these are 2. So when you're designing your project, your permanent housing project, either rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, you'll need to weigh the pros and cons of doing rental assistance or leasing. There's a link here, again, to the regulations, so you can read more about what a leasing project, leasing expenses look like. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Supportive services can be used in pretty much any project type that you might apply for. Supportive services only, including street outreach, but not limited to street outreach, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. Most projects that I've seen ask for case management. That's very typical. But look at all the other things you can ask for. Helping pay somebody's childcare expenses. Now, I know you've got an early learning coalition that does childcare vouchers, but sometimes there's a copay. Or sometimes those programs are not available at the time that the head of household is working. Maybe they work, 11 to 7, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So there's cases where childcare is really important. You can pay for certain types of education expenses. You can pay for certain types of employment assistance or job training. Food, if necessary, although most of your households will have food assistance. Or you might be able to get it from the local food bank or other food programs. Transportation, like bus passes, helping them with housing search, in some cases, legal services, mental health or substance use services, outreach, if you're doing a street outreach project, and outpatient health services that in some cases can include medication assistance. And there's more shown that you can see when you go to that link. So there's lots of different kinds of supportive services. For a street outreach kind of project, you might use all of these. For a permanent supportive housing project, you might just use one or two. So you need to think about who you plan to serve. Are they families or individuals or both? What kinds of assistance will they need? And what kinds of assistance will they need that where that assistance isn't available from someone else? Maybe Career Source will solve, will answer all their employment assistance needs. Maybe it won't. So think about who you're serving and what their needs are and what can't be provided by a collaborating agency. All right, let's move to the next slide. Then there's also a category on the HUD budgets called operating. In brief, this pays for day-to-day operating costs of the HUD CoC funded project, not your agency at large. Maybe you already have 4 different types of projects operating, none of which get HUD CoC funding, and you want to add this 5th one with HUD CoC funding. You're not going to be able to pay for the operating costs related to those 4 other projects, just this one. So repairs and maintenance. For instance, you have a transitional housing facility and you need to make roof repairs. You can pay for some or all of that depending on how much of the transitional housing is funded by this particular funding source. Property taxes and insurance on that building, utilities for that building, furniture and equipment, washers and dryers, beds, those sorts of things. But here's a big but. You can't ask for operating funding if you are asking for a project that's going to have rental assistance in it. Oh, sorry about my dogs. It was inevitable. And you can't use this funding to operate emergency shelter or supportive services only facilities. So usually what you'll see is operating being asked for transitional housing facilities or facility-based permanent housing projects, either on site for somebody that operates permanent housing or a leasing type project. So be careful about asking for operating if you're not one of those kinds of projects. It might just be disallowed, that budget line item. Okay, let's move to the next one. There we go, project administration. You can ask for up to 10% of the project funding for admin, but only admin associated with the project. So again, if you've got 4 other projects already operating, and this HUD CoC funded one you're asking for is the 5th one, you're not going to pay for all of your CFO's salary and all your executive director's salary from this funding source, only a piece of it. Eligible uses include general management and oversight, such as project evaluation and accounting. So a part of the chief financial officer's salary, for instance, and also training of staff. There's a link where you can go to learn more about project admin. Notice that's limited to up to 10% of project funding. Some project applicants don't ask for any. Others ask for the full 10% as kind of a matter of course. It's your decision. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. What's next and how to learn more? So as Sherry mentioned at the outset of this presentation, in early June, HUD has said they will issue the FY fiscal year 2026 Continuum of Care Program Notice of Funding Opportunity. That's that kind of grant opportunity that's issued nationally. HLA is the agency, the only agency that is able to coordinate the local application to HUD for funding under that NOFO. So you won't apply to HUD directly. You'll apply through HLA to HUD if you make it through the local competition. So HLA will, soon after that NOFO is issued by HUD, HLA will post an email about the local funding competition, which is the kind of first thing that happens is a request for applications, or RFA, is issued. And that'll say kind of, here's broad strokes, how much funding we will probably have available to us through this competition. These are the project types you can apply for. Here are some caps that HUD has placed on us. For instance, maybe in this NOFO, they'll say only 30% of your new projects can be requesting permanent housing type projects. We don't know that's going to happen, but theoretically, they might say a thing like that. So that's going to be some important information. So you'll need to read that in detail. There'll be an applicant conference, a Zoom kind of informational session that says, here's what we know about the NOFO now that it's been issued, and here's what our local competition is going to look like. Here's the deadline for submitting your project application. Here's the types of project applications we'll consider. And here's how your project application will be ranked, scored and ranked, so that in the local competition, we can decide out of the, say, 25 projects that are put forward, which 15 or 20 we might be able to send up to HUD for consideration. HLA does not determine who gets funded. There's a scoring and ranking committee that determines who gets sent up to HUD, but HUD ultimately determines who gets funded. So there's a kind of settling out process locally, but actual funding decisions are made in DC. All right, let's move to the next slide. Here are some important links. There's for the Pinellas CoC, there's kind of a funding landing page where you can go. This is where, for instance, the local request for applications will be posted. The link to the NOFO will be posted. The scoring and ranking tools, lots of things will show up on that page when they're ready. There's also a HUD CoC competition landing page where the link is provided on the slide. Then there's a thing called eSnaps. some of you are familiar with that, but that's the HUD mandated online grant application system. And that's how you have to submit a project for request for funding from HUD. eSnaps has lots of information online. Toolkits and other resources are linked to on this slide. And then the actual online grant system itself, there's a link to that here. You don't need to know about that now, but you'll need to know about that as soon as the local request for applications is issued. So if you're thinking about applying, I would go ahead and start looking into those. Again, if you have questions about that, you can email us. And let's go to the next slide where our email is available. So locally, any and all CoC funding questions can be submitted to cocnofo@hlapinellas.org. If you want to submit a question to HUD about the HUD CoC program, oh, thank you. Also there, you can check the chat there for some links that Sherry's put in. Also, if you want to submit a question to HUD about the HUD CoC program, for instance, you might want to say, I can't really tell if so-and-so at cost is eligible under the supportive services category. You can submit a question to HUD and they will answer you directly. It takes them a minute, frankly. So don't submit that question 5 minutes before your project application is due. But if you can submit it a few days before that project application is due, that's a good source of information. There will also, once the NOFO is issued, you will also be provided by HUD emails where you can submit questions directly about the NOFO and about eSnaps. In the applicant conference that we'll have in June, we'll provide that information to you as well. But in the meantime, these are your go-to sources of information. All right, I think that was the last slide. Am I right? Yes, okay. So good. We covered all the material in an hour, and now is the time to, let me turn it over to Sherry. Do you have anything to add there?
So what I'm adding into the chat box is our community calendar. So if you go to pinellashomeless.org, there's an option to look at our community calendar. That's where trainings like this will be. Also, if you go there and you scroll down to the very bottom, there's an area to sign up for updates, various newsletters, any kind of update that you want. And if you sign up there, then we will make sure that you get the information that you need when things come down, especially for providers. If you say that you want information for providers, I would definitely click that. It goes into our constant contact, and then it can go out to you. Anyone who we had the 2025 NOFO, that series of NOFOs that dropped over the fall and winter. Anyone who applied or put in a letter of intent will get information as well, or attended the applicant conference will also be included in any releases that come out in the future. But I would definitely keep my eye out on that funding page that I put in the chat for the CoC. And then finally, one more thing I just wanted to add, and that is that while the HLA, we have a memorandum, we have an agreement with the CoC as the lead agency, the collaborative applicant, and there is a and lots of things involved with that. But like Susan said, we manage the local process, that competition. Everything, though, does go through the CoC for approval. So beyond the review and rank committee, then there's also the CoC board approves any of the projects that and the application that the HLA has put together on behalf of the CoC. And then before that gets sent up to HUD. So I want to let everyone know that the HLA, while we manage, we do not make any final decisions. And what Susan said was absolutely correct. We don't manage those projects after, or the funding after they're awarded. That is directly with HUD. Any questions? Thank you, Amani. I'm not seeing any questions. I will add also in the community calendar other events as well. So HMIS trainings, coordinated entry. If you look at the Pinellas CoC website, the policies and procedures are there. If you are funded through HUD, we will make sure that you get that information as well, uh, or any CoC program for that matter. And there was recently a couple of updates were made, but they don't really have much bearing um, on you right now as far as applying for any resources when they become available.
I actually thought of another thing I should have mentioned, so I'm just going to do a little PS. Um, PS, if you receive funding from the HUD CoC program, there are certain record keeping requirements. And I mentioned a couple of them. For instance, for rent assistance, the housing quality standards showing that you did an inspection of each unit, the rent reasonableness documentation showing that you compared that rent to other similar units. You're also required to have case files for each household you assist. If it's a street outreach kind of project, those case files might or might not be extensive depending on how long you've worked with the person. Um, it might just be, we assessed this individual and here's the assessment and here were some immediate needs we provided assistance with, food, bus pass, etc. For a rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing project, or even transitional housing project, those case files can be extensive. You might meet, you're required to meet with each household, at least make an attempt to meet with them monthly. Um, but you might meet with someone multiple times a week to help assess their housing stability needs, help them get, medical care, child care, employment assistance. You're going to document all those things in writing. And there's a social work adage that says if it's not in the notes, it didn't happen. So you can have notes about all those things. And you'll have a copy of the lease showing it's a 12-month lease. You'll have a lease addendum called the VAWA addendum, a Violence Against Women Act addendum, which says that if there's a reason that the person in that unit has to flee due to domestic violence, they can get out of the lease and get placed in a different unit with no repercussions. So there's lots of documentation that is required for this program because of the federal, state and local requirements around this type of funding. So if you kind of sign up for this, you need to know that that's part of the drill too. So that's not something I wanted to mention, just so that if you don't already have those kind of systems in place, that's something you'll want to make sure you get into place soon if you apply for this funding. I think that's the only PS I had. Any other questions? Okay, Sherry?
Thank you, Zelda. I guess we can close out. Okay, well, I appreciate it, and please do. You have the research. We will be sending out the PDF to PowerPoints. You'll have all those links. Use the links that were in the chat as well if you have any questions or want to sign up for more information. I do say that we will be having more of these opportunities available to get together and talk about different types of funding available to our CoC, and look forward to seeing you then. So talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.